the fading light of an autumn evening, the quiet streets of Mercer County whispered secrets. Every corner of the town carried memories, and tonight, one such memory was destined to be rewritten in blood and broken trust. At the center of this unfolding drama was Henry Calloway, a man whose world was defined by both darkness and light. Legally blind since birth, Henry had learned to navigate the world with an unyielding sense of dignity and resilience. His indispensable companion was his trusty cane, a simple tool that had guided him through a lifetime of challenges. Henry's journey that fateful day began like any other. Earlier, he had attended a local civic meeting where he shared his thoughts on community reform, a topic he held dear given his long history of witnessing bureaucratic indifference. His measured words and calm demeanor had earned him the respect of neighbors and friends. Yet, on this particular day, as he slowly made his way home after an evening out with a few acquaintances, fate had other plans. The county's streets, usually bathed in the warm glow of street lamps, were shrouded in a mysterious haze that night. Rumors of an uptick in police activity had circulated earlier in the day, whispers of a law enforcement crackdown on disorder that set nerves on edge. As Henry ambled along the cracked sidewalks, his cane tapping a steady rhythm, two patrol cars rolled quietly into view. Their headlights, piercing through the mist, fell on Henry in a way that made the moment feel almost predestined. One officer, with eyes that had seen too many nights like this, stepped out of his vehicle. His uniform was crisp, his face set in a grim expression, and his hand hovered near his holster. Without any preamble, he called out to Henry in a clipped, imperious tone. "Stop right there. I need to see some identification." The command echoed through the empty street like a challenge. Henry, startled but composed, paused. He knew his rights well. His education had not come solely from hardship, but from a genuine desire to understand the principles of justice. In a measured voice, he responded, "Officer, I'm Henry Calloway. I don't carry identification on me at all times, but I assure you, I'm a law-abiding citizen." His words were calm, yet they vibrated with an undercurrent of defiance. The officer's partner, a younger man whose eyes betrayed a mixture of anxiety and rigid adherence to protocol, eyed Henry's cane suspiciously. "That cane," he murmured, as if the object itself might be concealing danger. "It could be a weapon." The accusation was preposterous, but in the charged atmosphere of heightened alert, it carried an unsettling weight. Before Henry could protest further, the officers closed in, voices raised and procedures accelerated. One of them barked orders, and in a blur of authority, Henry was seized by a grip far stronger than his fragile frame could bear. He was handcuffed roughly, his protests drowned out by the clamor of the police radio and the stern commands of his captors. The cane, the very symbol of his perseverance, was yanked from his grasp and treated as evidence of a threat that never truly existed. Within minutes, Henry found himself crammed into the back of a patrol car, the cool night air seeping in through the windows. The dashcam, silently recording every moment, captured the injustice of it all. The confusion in Henry's eyes, the dismissive glances exchanged between officers, and the palpable tension that crackled like static electricity in the confined space of the vehicle. At the county station, in a cramped, poorly lit holding cell, Henry was left alone with his thoughts and the echo of injustice. The stark fluorescent lights above did little to dispel the darkness that had already settled into his soul. Hours passed with no explanation, only the cold reality that his rights were being trampled in a bureaucratic maelstrom that cared little for the truth. The allegations were nebulous. A threat, a potential weapon, an arrest that defied reason. Outside the walls of the station, whispers began to circulate. In the local diner, Patrons talked in hushed tones about the man with the cane, a veteran of life who had now become the victim of a systemic failure. Social media lit up with snippets of the dashcam footage, and soon enough, a community that prided itself on fairness found itself questioning the very institution meant to protect them. Back in his cell, Henry's mind raced. He recalled the words of a wise mentor from his youth, who had always said, "Injustice, like a shadow, follows those who seek the light." Henry understood that his plight was not just about his own mistreatment. It was emblematic of a deeper malaise that had infected Mercer County. He resolved that if he were to fight back, it would not only be for himself but for every person who had ever been silenced by an unjust system. Just as the weight of despair began to settle in, a sudden commotion at the cell door shattered the silence. The metal clanged against the frame as a guard rushed in, eyes wide with urgency. "Mr. Calloway, there's been a development," the guard announced, his voice trembling between excitement and trepidation. "We've just received new evidence regarding your case." Before Henry could process the words, the guard continued, "Something that might change everything." The statement hung in the air, heavy with both hope and the threat of further complications. What could this mysterious evidence be? And would it finally shine a light on the truth behind his wrongful arrest? Henry's heart pounded as the door creaked open wider, a sliver of dim light casting elongated shadows across the cold, concrete floor. In that fleeting moment, he realized that his fight for justice was just beginning, and that every moment to come would test the limits of his endurance and resolve. The early hours of the morning found Mercer County shrouded in uncertainty. While the town slept under a blanket of uneasy silence, underground whispers of the previous night's events had started to build into a growing roar. The shocking footage of Henry Calloway's wrongful arrest had gone viral on social media, igniting fierce debates about civil rights, police conduct, and the opaque corridors of local power. The entire community seemed poised on the brink of upheaval, awaiting the next revelation in a case that was rapidly transforming from a personal tragedy into a watershed moment for the county. Inside the stark confines of a county detention center, Henry lay awake in his cell, his thoughts a turbulent mix of despair and determination. The mysterious announcement of new evidence earlier that night had left him with a fragile glimmer of hope, a hope that now burned with an intensity that belied his physically frail condition. As dawn broke, the gray light filtering through the barred window painted the cell in a pallid hue, almost symbolic of the injustices that had taken root in Mercer County. Across town, in a modest office cluttered with case files and legal textbooks, Emma Rodriguez, a determined civil rights attorney known for her tenacity and unwavering commitment to justice, reviewed the emerging details of Henry's case. Emma had built her reputation on taking on cases that many others deemed unwinnable. When she first heard about the incident, she was struck not only by the blatant abuse of power but also by the systemic issues that allowed such injustice to thrive. She knew that behind every wrongful arrest lay a maze of miscommunication, negligence, and a culture of impunity that had long festered within the local law enforcement ranks. Late that morning, Emma received an urgent call from a confidential source inside the county police department. The voice on the other end was trembling with apprehension as they relayed a critical piece of information. Evidence had surfaced indicating that the officers involved had manipulated their internal logs and altered crucial timestamps on their body cam footage. According to this source, the evidence was far more damning than anyone had anticipated. It not only proved Henry's innocence but also implicated several higher-ranking officials in a deliberate cover-up that had spanned months, if not years. Emma's mind raced as she scribbled notes and marked pages in the case files. The revelation sent shockwaves through her, confirming her worst suspicions about systemic corruption. If the evidence could be authenticated, it might not only exonerate Henry but also lead to a sweeping indictment of the department's practices. Yet, There was also a daunting risk. Exposing such deep-seated corruption could provoke a backlash from powerful figures who were determined to silence the truth. Back at the detention center, Henry's already fragile resolve was bolstered by the arrival of his legal representative. Emma had managed to secure a brief visit for him, and as the heavy metal door creaked open, a ray of hope seemed to pierce the gloom. In hushed tones, Henry recounted the details of the night, his voice steady despite the emotional toll. Emma listened intently, her eyes narrowing with every word. She assured him that she was already on the case, working tirelessly to gather corroborative evidence and identify key witnesses who could confirm his version of events. With every new detail uncovered, the layers of deception began to peel away. Emma discovered that the local prosecutor had been unusually reticent about the case from the outset, and that there were whispers of external pressures, political, financial, and even personal, exerted on the county officials. The stakes were higher than anyone had imagined, with Henry's case now representing a direct challenge to the very legitimacy of Mercer County's law enforcement practices. Late in the afternoon, as a storm of public outrage began to brew outside the county halls, Emma convened an emergency meeting with a small group of dedicated insiders, journalists, community activists, and even a few reform-minded officers who had grown disillusioned with the system. In a cramped back room of a local cafe, they pored over stacks of documents, photographs, and audio recordings. One recording, in particular, sent shivers down their spines. A hushed conversation between two high-ranking officials discussing how to manage the narrative if the new evidence came to light. The implications were staggering. Not only had there been a deliberate attempt to fabricate the circumstances of Henry's arrest, but the scandal ran deeper, implicating a network of individuals whose power extended far beyond the confines of the police department. Emma's face hardened with resolve as she shared the recording with the group. "This isn't just about one wrongful arrest," she declared. "This is about the systemic abuse of power that has been allowed to continue unchecked for too long. We have an opportunity here. If we expose the truth, we can spark the reform this county so desperately needs." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them like a mantle of responsibility. Each person present understood that they were standing at a precipice, where a single misstep could either catalyze monumental change or plunge them into dangerous territory. In the midst of this growing movement, tension escalated. Anonymous threats began arriving, both for Emma and for any officer brave enough to testify against the corrupt system. Rumors of surveillance and break-ins circulated among the group, and every whispered conversation was now laden with the possibility of reprisal. Yet, amidst the fear, there was also a determined defiance. They had seen enough injustice to know that silence was not an option. The collective resolve to seek the truth was stronger than the fear of retaliation. As night descended once again on Mercer County, Emma prepared to submit a detailed report to a trusted statewide watchdog group. The document, compiled from hours of covert investigations and insider testimonies, promised to be the catalyst for a public inquiry that could topple entrenched power structures. In a quiet moment at her office, with rain pelting the windows and the hum of the city muted by the storm, Emma looked at a faded photograph of her late mentor, a man who had dedicated his life to the pursuit of justice, and silently vowed that she would honor his legacy by ensuring that Henry Calloway's story was not buried beneath bureaucratic indifference. Just as Emma was about to hit send on the report, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The text was brief, but its meaning was clear: "Stop now, or you will be next." A chill ran down her spine as the implications of the threat sank in. The message was not just a warning. It was a declaration of war against those who dared to expose the truth. At that very moment, as the storm raged outside and the future of Mercer County hung in a delicate balance, Emma realized that her next move could either spark the long-awaited reform or put her life in grave danger. The storm had passed over Mercer County, leaving behind a fragile calm that belied the turbulent battles fought in the shadows. In the early hours of a crisp morning, the county courthouse stood as a somber monument to both authority and its shortcomings. Within its walls, the fate of Henry Calloway, and by extension, the soul of the entire community, was about to be determined. The air inside was thick with anticipation, the weight of truth and justice converging in a courtroom that had become the epicenter of a storm long in the making. Emma Rodriguez, her face set in determined lines, prepared to present the damning evidence that had the potential to shatter the carefully constructed facade of systemic corruption. The once hidden recordings, manipulated body cam timestamps, and the whispers of insider testimonies had all been compiled into an airtight case. Yet, as she arranged her documents and notes on the polished oak table, she could not shake the chill of the anonymous threat that had been sent to her days before. A threat that now loomed as a dark reminder of the peril that accompanies truth. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with a mixture of hope, anger, and resignation. Journalists, community activists, and curious onlookers filled the seats, each face illuminated by the soft glow of mobile screens and the fervor of expectations. Henry Calloway sat quietly in the defendant's chair, his demeanor calm despite the ordeal he had endured. His eyes, though dimmed by the shadows of his visual impairment, burned with an inner light, a fierce determination to reclaim his dignity and expose the injustice that had marred his life. The trial began with the prosecutor recounting the series of events that had led to Henry's wrongful arrest. The narrative was steeped in assumptions and conjecture, painting him as a potential threat solely because of his dependence on a cane. But as Emma took the stand, a palpable shift occurred in the room. With measured words and unwavering resolve, she laid out the evidence that dismantled the prosecution's case piece by piece. Her voice resonated with the authority of someone who had witnessed firsthand the corrosive effects of unchecked power. As she played the incriminating recordings, a hushed conversation between high-ranking officials discussing how to manage the narrative, a murmur ran through the courtroom. Every word from the hidden audio confirmed what many had already suspected. The arrest was not an isolated incident, but a calculated abuse of power designed to silence dissent and obscure the truth. Emma's presentation was meticulous, interspersed with moments of raw passion that spoke to the heart of a community desperate for justice. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the officers implicated in the cover-up found themselves in a precarious position. The revelation of their manipulation of body cam footage not only jeopardized their careers, but also threatened to unleash a torrent of accountability that would ripple far beyond the county lines. Rumors swirled that higher authorities were already mobilizing to conduct an independent investigation, a move that would put even the most entrenched figures in the system under scrutiny. Outside the courtroom, tensions simmered. Community rallies, sparked by the viral dashcam footage and fueled by a sense of collective betrayal, had grown in both size and intensity. Banners demanding justice and reform waved in the cool morning air, and chants of truth and accountability echoed through the streets. Mercer County was on the brink of transformation, a metamorphosis that could either restore faith in the institutions meant to serve the people or plunge the community into deeper chaos. Inside, as Emma concluded her testimony, the courtroom was engulfed in a heavy silence. The judge, a seasoned arbiter of justice, deliberated with a measured gravitas that mirrored the stakes of the case. For Henry, every second stretched into an eternity. He recalled the moments of helplessness, the defiant stand against injustice, and the silent hope that had sustained him through the ordeal. In that stillness, it seemed as though the very future of his life and the integrity of Mercer County hung in a delicate balance. Then, the judge's gavel struck, shattering the silence with a resonant boom. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, the judge began, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. It is clear that the arrest of Mr. Calloway was not only unwarranted but constituted a grave violation of his civil rights. A collective gasp filled the courtroom as the gravity of the ruling began to sink in. The judge continued, detailing the charges to be levied against the officers involved and outlining a path toward redress that would see Mercer County pay a heavy price. A sum that had now been estimated at $6.5 million in compensatory damages. A ripple of relief and vindication surged through Henry as he listened. Tears welled in his eyes. Tears not just of sorrow for what had been endured, but of hope for a future where justice could prevail. For Emma and her allies, the verdict was a hard-won victory, a beacon of truth that cut through the murk of corruption and abuse. Yet, even as the courtroom erupted in cautious celebration, a final twist loomed on the horizon. In the moments following the ruling, as reporters scrambled to capture the unfolding drama, an urgent call came through on Emma's phone. It was a voice she hadn't heard since the days of covert investigations. A trusted contact from the department, whispering of new, unsettling developments. The contact revealed that the investigation into the cover-up was far from over. In fact, it had uncovered an even larger network of corruption stretching beyond Mercer County, implicating figures in state government and powerful private interests. Before anyone could fully comprehend the magnitude of this revelation, a flurry of footsteps echoed down the hallway outside the courtroom. Doors burst open, and a cadre of officers in unmarked vehicles swarmed the precinct, their intentions unclear. A palpable tension took hold, a sense that the battle for justice was entering a new, dangerous phase. As the chaos began to unfold, Emma turned to the gathered crowd with a determined look. "This is not the end," she declared, her voice firm and resolute. "Today we have taken a stand, but our fight for truth and justice has only just begun." Her words resonated deeply with every onlooker, inspiring both hope and caution in equal measure. Henry, still processing the verdict, felt the weight of the moment. The storm of injustice had momentarily subsided, only to give way to the promise of a new, uncertain dawn. The forces that had once seemed insurmountable now revealed their hidden depths, and the call for reform echoed louder than ever. Yet, as the courthouse doors closed behind the departing officials, the future remained shrouded in mystery, a mystery that beckoned for answers in the days to come. Before we close, I want to thank you for following this gripping journey. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and share this video to help spread the word. Stay tuned for more true crime stories that shine a light on the hidden truths of our world.